Chapter 9 of Baiting the Bears by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. The Package of Bonds. The Rollin incident wasn't the only one which happened in connection with the panic over GW&O stock. Half a dozen other big brokers came into Lockwood's office and upbraided him for dumping his big batch of shares onto the market at a critical moment. They had all lost money through the break in price, which had affected the entire list to a greater or less degree. The banker defended his action by saying he had a perfect right to act as he had done. He had received word from his broker that the stock might go down at any moment under the onslaught made upon it by the bears, and he had merely endeavored to protect his own interests. The protesting brokers, however, did not resort to anything beyond abusive language, as the newspaper accounts of what had happened to Rowland had a deterrent effect upon them. They didn't propose to get into the tombs themselves by any rash proceedings. So they all went their several ways, swearing to do all sorts of things to Lawrence Lockwood if they ever caught him in a tight place. As for the banker, he had made close on to $1 million profit by getting out from under in time, and he was quite satisfied with the situation. It was about this time that Phil got his tip on A, B, and C. Mr. Lockwood had sent him to the American Trust Company for some documents on deposit there, and while waiting for them to be delivered to him, the boy had accidentally overheard part of a conversation between two old retired brokers, which had let in quite a flood of light on the deal underway. "I'm satisfied it's a good thing," he said to himself that night, "and I'm tempted to risk the bulk of my boodle on it." The stock was selling at 52, and Phil proposed to purchase 4,000 shares on the usual margin. It was quite an early thing for a boy to do, but then Phil had the courage of his convictions. Having decided to go into the speculation, he drew the necessary money next morning and visited his broker. In the talk of the street, Phil went long of 4,000 shares of A, B, and C at 52, on a borrowed margin of 10%. That is to say, he paid Brown, his broker, $20,800 for stock whose par value was $400,000, and whose market value was $208,000, thus attaining credit of $192,000. When the boy showed Marie the memorandum of his purchase, she fairly gasped. "Why, Phil Thorne, have you really lost your senses?" she cried. "The idea of putting all your money into stocks again so soon after the narrow shave you had the other day." "I haven't put it all in. I've got nearly $3,000 left." "But just think of the risk you are taking. Nearly $21,000. Why, it's a small fortune in itself." "As I have made it all out of a $20 note, my first investment, I think I am justified in keeping it moving." "You certainly have been a very lucky boy, but," and she shook her index finger warningly, "some people presume on their good fortune." "Do they?" laughed Phil. "Yes. Look at those experienced brokers who were caught in the fall of GW&O. When such people are occasionally nipped, what chances have you, comparatively inexperienced in the business, to escape without having your wings clipped?" "That's right, too. Still, I think I have a good thing on hand now." "That's the way with all you speculators. Don't forget that a pitcher may go to the well 99 times in safety, but the 100th time it might get broken." "Oh, this is only my 5th plunge. I've got lots of chances yet, haven't I?" "I don't know about that. I feel awfully provoked with you." "Why should you?" "Because from this out I shall feel just too nervous for anything over the fate of your $20,800. I shall be watching A, B, and C every day now. Every time it drops a point or two I shall have an attack of stage fright." "Why should you, Miss Marie?" "Oh, because—" "Because?" laughed Phil. "That's only a girl's reason. What else?" "That's reason enough," she replied with a slight blush, as she adjusted her hat before the glass. "And every time it goes up a point or two, what then?" grinned the boy. "Oh, you want to know too much, Mr. Thorne," she answered saucily. Next day Mr. Lockwood took Phil to the United States Safe Deposit Company with him. He took a number of bonds out of his box in the vaults, and after making a memorandum of them, brought them out into the reception room where he had left Phil, and handing the package to him, told him to give it to Mr. Reese at the office. Phil started for Wall Street, while the banker went off to attend a meeting of directors of a company which he was largely interested financially. "Mr. Reese, I was directed by Mr. Lockwood to hand you this package of bonds," said Phil on his return to the office. "How do you know the package contains bonds?" asked the bookkeeper sharply. "Mr. Lockwood said so." "All right," said Reese, turning away and laying the package on his desk. About 3 o'clock the banker returned and entered his private room. Half an hour after he rang for Enoch, he asked him to bring him the bonds from Mr. Reese. Mr. Lockwood had a visitor at the time, and when Enoch handed him the bonds he laid them down on the desk until he got ready to attend to them. In 15 minutes he sent Enoch for Phil. As the boy came into the reception room, the banker and his caller came out of the private office together. "I'll be with you in a moment, Thorne," Mr. Lockwood said, and then he accompanied his visitor out into the corridor, while Phil entered his sanctum. At that moment Reese came out of the counting room with a package of papers and entered the private office. He went over to Mr. Lockwood's desk and was in the act of leaving them there when he noticed the bonds. Phil was looking out of the window at a pushcart vendor who was being hustled along Wall Street by a policeman, and consequently had his back to the bookkeeper. He had not even heard him enter the room. A sudden idea entered Reese's head. He glanced stealthily around, and perceiving that he was unobserved, he grabbed up the package of bonds, did not leave the papers he had brought with him, and slipped out of the room. "Enoch, I want to see you," he said as he glided across the reception room and disappeared into the counting room. His nephew followed him to his desk. "Do you want to get square with Thorne and earn $10 at the same time?" said Reese to Enoch in a low tone. "Do I? Well, just try me." The bookkeeper by this time had opened the package of bonds, and taking the topmost one, handed it to Enoch. "Put that into the inside pocket of Thorne's overcoat without anyone seeing you. Quick." "I twig," grinned the young rascal, seizing the bond and then walking toward the rear of the room where the clothes closet was situated. Doing up the package again, the bookkeeper pushed it under the big safe behind him. Presently Enoch returned and paused beside his desk. "It's planted all right," he said with an eager look at his uncle. "You think you've got him dead to rights?" "I hope so," answered Reese in a purring tone. "So do I. Give me the $10 you promised me." Reese peeled a bill off a roll he drew from his pocket and handed it to his graceless nephew. "Now, don't spend it all at once." "Oh, rats," replied the ungainly youth rudely as he walked back to his post in the reception room. As he took his seat, Mr. Lockwood re-entered his office. "Thorne," he said, "I have an important letter I wish you to deliver at the Mills building. You must see the gentleman to whom it is addressed and give it to him personally. You will bring back a reply." "Yes, sir," replied Phil, hastily leaving the room. He put on his light overcoat and hat and left the office without a word, passing Mr. Reese on his way across the reception room to the private office. The bookkeeper watched him go with a curious smile. Reese handed the package of papers to the banker which he had previously visited the room to deliver and then taken back with him. Leaving the room, he went over to his nephew and had a short but earnest conversation with him. Enoch nodded his head eagerly several times, and when his uncle left him, he held another bill in his fingers, the receipt of which had given him great delight. End of chapter 9.